at bestprogram.org. We are joined today by our sponsors and supporters. Number one being from the College Diversity Network, Mr. Fields Jackson. His website is College Diversity Network. They have a career fair on the 23rd that you can register for. Again, that's collegediversitynetwork.org. And the career fair is from 3 to 6 with a host of employers who are looking to hire. Fields Jackson, would you like to say hello to our audience?
Hello, thanks for allowing me to join. I'll drop, we got a career fair that's coming up on the 23rd from 3 to 6. A lot of exciting companies there. As a matter of fact, Diageo, which is also a sponsor, is one of the companies that'll be there. So I'll drop the registration link into the chat. It's free. And again, the companies there are looking to hire you. And so I would take full advantage of it. So I'll drop that in the chat. And thank you for allowing me to jump on board.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce the chairman of our board, Amber Batchelor. Amber, can you say hello to our audience?
Hi, good afternoon and good morning to some of you that are in different time zones. We are so excited to have you today. You have a treat in store for you. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to serve in this capacity. I am a proud graduate of St. Augustine's University and an HBCU in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am here to support you in any way that we can. I look forward to getting connected with you in the chat. Thank you so much, ladies, for inviting me today.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to make sure we get right into our content, which is about bridging the soft skills gap. The reality is that we have seen tremendous increases in the firms that are recruiting at HBCUs. Unfortunately, the flip side is we're also seeing declines in career success and opportunities. And much of that is being attributed to soft skills. While we are hearing from recruiters that students are certainly technically capable, unfortunately, 85% or 89% of hiring failures are attributed to soft skill development and soft skill display. So this opportunity or this discussion is about addressing what are soft skills and how might you best demonstrate those. And to that end, I would like to introduce our speakers and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. I'm going to do that in alphabetical order, starting with Terry Bankston. So Terry, if you could tell us where you're from and about how many students you actually coach and see in the recruitment process each year, that would be great.
Thank you, Carolyn, and hello to everyone that's joining us this afternoon. Terry Bankston, I have some dear friends that are on here that I haven't seen, and we've been friends forever and ever and ever. So I am the Director of Career Services at Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware, led by Dr. Tony Allen. Our office is continually trying to reimagine what career services looks like. So when you talk about coaching, I see everyone from the folks that are coming here on tours, they come up to our office to talk, to our alumni who have been seasoned alumni that go all the way back into the 80s that come up and have their resumes reviewed. We work on some interview skills. So if you ask me for a number, it's everybody. Anybody that attended or had something to do here at Delaware State University, we touch. My team and I, we touch them. So I'm anxious to get into the discussion. Even as of 2 hours ago, I've changed the phrase from soft skills to power skills. That's the buzzword is instead of soft skills, it's power skills. And so that's where I'm headed with my discussion. So glad to be on. I'll let everybody go on with their introductions. Kendra Harris, I love you, and it's so good to see you.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Leslie Roberson. Leslie, can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us more about your interviewing engagement?
Yes, I am Leslie Roberson. It's a pleasure to join everyone today. I am actually the founder and CEO of the Black Beauty Collective, which is a hair and beauty retail store featuring exclusively Black-owned brands. We will be working with tons of college students along the way, but that's not why I'm here. More importantly, my background is HR. I have spent most of my career working in talent acquisition. My corporate role is currently with Meta. So I know tons about soft skills, and fear not, a lot of seasoned professionals, we have the same conversations with them as well about their soft skills and how to display and talk through soft skills during interviews. And so that'll be my positioning today, to just talk about how to get those out there and how to make sure you're always like existing in that moment and not just reserving it for the interview.
Thank you. And our final panelist is Dr. Danielle Robinson. She actually is the person who recommended that we do this panel. So thank you. Dr. Danielle Robinson is with Diageo. She is a core sponsor to make this happen for us. So Dr. Robinson, can you introduce yourself to our panel?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Danielle Robinson, Diageo. I've been here in this industry 18 years. I'm an HR person by background, 22 years in HR and 10 years in corporate relations. My role here is head of community engagement and partnerships. So my role is to do things like this and to connect with people in communities of color. I run a national, which is also global, bartending and hospitality training program. We operate in 5 cities, Houston, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Toronto, Canada, and Washington, D.C., and soon to be starting a program in Chicago, Illinois, to support our Guinness Brewery. If you don't know who Diageo is, we're the largest spirit and beer company in the world, with brands such as Johnnie Walker, Ciroc, Kettle One, Smirnoff, Crown Royal, Bailey's, Tanqueray, Don Julio, De Leon, et cetera, et cetera. So the list goes on and on. We are a marketing and commercial sales company. And, we have products that are in your homes. So I recommended this panel because when we see students across our 29 HBCU campus partners that we have as part of our community support, I see hundreds of students every year. I talk to hundreds of students every year. We see them in conferences. We see them in-house, internal, and interviewing. And the soft skills, I feel, are the one place that we as a community, a Black community, really need to power up, as Terry says, because you can really X yourself out of an interview when your paperwork speaks highly of you, but you can't communicate that in the words when you show up in person. So the purpose of today is really to give you more pointers and guidance around how to be able to tell your story in an effective way.
Thank you. So taking a lead from Terry Bankston, I love that you, and I'd love to adapt for this conversation using the word power skills. A recent study that was conducted by Harvard said that 85% of career success can be attributed to soft skills. And so Terry, I'm just wondering if you can define, if you could please for our audience define what soft skills, I'm sorry, not soft skills, power skills are.
COVID and the pandemic piece made us all have to go back to communicating in a manner that we weren't used to. We would normally be in each other's company all the time, and we got into the virtual piece like we're doing now. And some of those soft skills, we won't do the whole generational thing, but things like emailing, how you respond to text messages, the time management piece in responding both by email and text messaging, and even being able to pick up the phone and call someone and get information by asking questions directly, being able to respond directly without going into a lot of dialogue. What we found with students is that this is where we'll do the generational thing. When I was growing up, it was nothing for me to answer the phone at home and say, Bankston's residence, who would you like to speak to? You'd like to speak to my mom? One moment, please, and call my mom to the phone. Or ask who's calling, she's not available to talk right now, I'll take a message and get it to her. Fast forward to the Jetsons generation now, they don't have home phones. So they're not used to even picking up the phone and saying, Bankston residents. And they can look at their cell phone and not answer the phone if they don't want to. So that impact just from just that makes it where we're not going to be negative, but I'll get students that'll call me and say, hey, Mr. Bankston, no. We're not going to go to, hey, Mr. Bankston, would you call your employer and do that? But see, there is a chance that they feel comfortable enough that they think that they can call somebody and say, hey, Danielle, this is Terry. No, that's not going to happen. And we've got to get back to the point where we err on the side of professionalism and build those power skills back up so that we can build that respect level back where you want to get that impact from students as well as our next generation. Same thing with emails and text messages. If I get one more email from someone that says, because they know I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and they'll say, yo, Terry, no, you're not going to send me an email that says, yo, Terry, when you're trying to get me to answer a question for you. So those are the kind of things where, the abbreviations and just those kind of things where we're trying to get students back to center to be able to show, not be lazy in their communication process.
So it sounds like, thank you for those examples. It sounds like you are saying that it's important to take a conservative approach on decorum and professionalism. Would that be a fair?
Absolutely. And it's better to start back at ground zero than to think that you're reinventing the wheel. And they know what works and what doesn't work. And I must say that, sometimes at home, we won't even go into some of the language that's used, that we can't get used to that language on a universal basis. It's okay when you, with your peers and whatever, but for 2 years, all students were around were family members and at home and around their cronies that they hang out with. And they weren't in that environment where, I tell our seniors this year that you were only here for one semester of your freshman year. And then for the next 2 years, you were not here at all. So you didn't have a chance to even build up the relationships that you need. You don't even know who your suite mates were at your first semester, that if you saw them walking on campus right now, that you wouldn't be able to recognize them and say hello or know anything about them. So we had a senior dinner this year, and the theme of it was masquerade ball. And I did that on purpose. They got all dressed up. We gave them masks when they came in. We had a nice dinner. And at the end, I said, all the seniors, please stand up, put your mask on, and I want you to turn around and meet somebody in this room that you didn't know before you walked in here, and take your mask off and talk to them. Because there's some people here that could be the nucleus for the next career that you have, because they're your cronies and you don't even know who they are. And that piece of taking the mask off, because they were probably here when you were freshmen. God forbid the fact, and Fields and I have had this discussion where Delaware State acquired another college, Wesley College. So when these students came back, you had people from Wesley, you had freshmen and sophomores that had never been on campus before, and then you had juniors and seniors that were here for 1 or 2 semesters, trying to get to know each other and find their way to class and find a way to get their grades up so they can graduate and look for a job, and have companies come on campus to recruit them, and they don't know who's who. So that discussion is what we're working on now. Yes.
Okay. So I think we have 2 companies that come from very different places represented. Dr. Robinson, your company has brands that are hundreds of years old, and Leslie, your company, Meta, has a brand that is very more current in the digital social space from an equity standpoint, not from a marketing standpoint. So I'm curious if there's anything you'd like to add on what a soft power skill is? And either one of you can take the mic. Okay, I'm going to call on Leslie.
Coming off mute. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we couldn't unmute ourselves. It was like,
Oh,
wow,
I'm sorry. Apologize.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I'm actually happy to. So I would say power skills, one of the most important one is a couple, because I'm a recruiter. That's how I see it. Active listening and effective communication. That'll get you through the gate, almost tried and true if you can do those two things, and following directions. So for me as a recruiter, the interviewing process doesn't start when you're sitting in front of someone. It actually starts when you submit your resume and you will fill out the application. If you're using the proper cases in terms of capitalizations, when you're filling out your application, things of that nature matter. And being able to present yourself with your best foot forward. And to Mr. Terry's point about making sure that when someone calls you, you're answering the phone appropriately and not just, and as a recruiter, I call people all the time. So they're screening out calls. I might spend an entire week trying to reach out to someone because they're screening calls and they don't know the number. And so a lot of times after so many tries, I'll go ahead and I'll text, which makes the interaction feel informal, but it's not informal because I'm still a recruiter for a company. And so thinking about things like that and always putting your best foot forward will differentiate you from other candidates. Because of everything that Terry just got done describing, it's not hard to stand out if you kind of follow what you're supposed to be doing, some standard principles when it comes to looking for a job and presenting yourself in front of a corporation.
Great, thank you.
I agree with everything that Leslie said. And my one was going to be effective communication, because I do think that language is important. You know, I was just talking to my 11-year-old about being lazy with his English the other day. That when you are very casual 24/7, that's really hard to turn it back on. So why not just be, very well spoken in your English all the time, and making that your primary. So I think it's the casual nature that people come into the interview process with, either beforehand, during, or after, to Leslie's point. Really taking time to make you stand out. So whether that be in your storytelling or how you communicate your value, or in your response afterwards. So, I always tell people that a handwritten thank you note always stands out above today, because everyone is using, people even send thank you notes by text, which is totally inappropriate. Or sometimes I get them on LinkedIn, which great that you're linked with me on LinkedIn, but it should be, a formal response, because you want people to know that you've taken the time to actually write a thank you, and that the interview process was just as important to you. Even though you may be interviewing with 20 companies, you want to make every company feel like they are your primary, because they're trying to pick the person that really wants to be a part of their environment. So however you can effectively communicate that, and especially with great examples, there are some, suggested questions that we'll probably mention throughout this session today, but just examples of how you have demonstrated XYZ. So teamwork, decisiveness, sense of urgency, planning, strategic thinking and planning, how have you demonstrated that? And whatever role you had, whether that's working at McDonald's or another corporation, all experience is valuable. It's just how you package it.
Okay, well, I definitely get the effective communication, be conservative. I'd like to get a view from our board chair. So I have to tell you, since Terry told you that he's in a frat, I'm going to tell you I'm in a sorority, and Amber is my sorority sister. And I'm game to have a hey girl conversation, and Amber is always errs on the side of conservative communication. So I'm curious, from the less seasoned generation, that's my way of saying that she's younger. Can you give our listeners some perspective on why it is important to be conservative in approach, and what might be some reasons that people think it's not important to be conservative in approach, how we might rethink that?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for calling me. I thought that was so kind of you. Yes. So having crossed in a sorority in undergrad, I've it sounds weird to say I've been involved for over 10 years at this point. But what I have found is that it's consistent across the board that you never want to take anything for granted. And you always want to have respect. You get further with respect than you do with familiarity, if that makes sense. So if I think that we have a connection or a bond because we're in the same, this case, a sorority, but maybe you're in a civic organization with someone, or you see they're in the same honor society as you on their LinkedIn profile, you never want to offend someone by being overly familiar. And you always want to showcase how well you carry the shield of your organization and the values and virtues of that organization by showing that high quality of standard that you put forth in all of your interactions. So every time I meet a young woman, and now, when you're older and you graduate, if you're part of the Divine Nine, it doesn't matter, where you crossed or what organization you crossed, you kind of have a little bit of a natural bond. But so anytime I see a younger person, I always try to share a few tips here or there that have been helpful. And I will say something, our dress is important too. So I do get a little more, I feel a little more at ease when approaching a young woman of color who I know isn't a sorority, because I know she had certain standards she had to follow in order to get into a meeting. Or if you go to an HBCU like Howard or somewhere else, in order to get into the school of B, you had to have a certain attire on, or you didn't get let into class. I started off at Howard, so I know I was properly hazed. I'm just playing. I was properly trained my freshman year to make sure I wore the right attire. So things like that really go a long way.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm curious, I would like to take the high road, and I'd love to give our panelists each a chance to give an example of a very strong or positive engagement that caught you off guard. It's like, wow, this is an extremely positive example of soft skill, power skill engagement. So why don't we mix this up, and can we start with Dr. Robinson? We need you to come off mute. Can we get Dr. Robinson? Thank you.
Yeah, she has to unmute me, I think is what I've set up. So I knew you were going to call on me because I didn't have an answer right away. But I would say a good example, I've had many actually, recruiting at National Black MBA Conference, you meet a lot of fantastic people over the years. I think generally speaking, I would say it's the person who makes eye contact. They come over with self-assurance and self-confidence, the handshake that some people may think is old school. I think people need to practice because some people squeeze your hands too hard. I mean, it's something really basic that can really turn people off in the beginning. But this particular person I'm thinking about was very confident. She was able to come. She knew a lot about Diageo already, so she had done her research. She asked very specific questions about certain initiatives that we had at Diageo that she wanted to know more about. She was familiar even with our employee resource groups, which is not really even on our websites, but she asked about the internal community and culture that we created at Diageo. She asked about my experience and some personal questions. So, she had questions for me as opposed to waiting for me to ask her questions. I felt like she was interviewing us in Diageo just as much as we were interviewing her. So I think, that way, the person's really interested in your company. They've done their research. They're asking more educated questions as opposed to generic open questions that you could ask at any company. And you can see that they're really making a decision based on a lot of information, not just on what the salary is or where the job is, but that they're really making a long-term commitment to your corporation.
Okay. So one question, you actually brought up a great area, or a great area just happened, which is when you really don't have an answer or you need to take a moment. Can you give us the power skill advice on, I'm going to need to think about that one, or as opposed to just blurting out something?
I think there are a few ways. I mean, I always say honesty is the best policy. And sometimes it is, that's a very interesting question that you ask. I've heard it asked a few different ways, and maybe having something in the back of your pocket. So everybody's going to ask you something about your background. They're going to ask you about your future. You can either divert and ask them a question back, or you can just say, I really don't have an answer to that. Maybe if you can ask me your next question, I'll give it some thought and we'll come back to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Moving on to Leslie, can you give us a unique or powerful example of demonstration of power skills in an interview?
Everything +1 to everything Danielle said, because that was completely on point. So the interviews that are always going to stand out from beginning to end is the candidate that does their pre-work before they enter into the interview. So if you shouldn't understand the core values, not only understanding the core values, but taking it a step further, which core value do I most identify with? How have I used it in my previous experience? Because then the way you're coming into the interview automatically sets you apart from other candidates, because now you know something, right? And you got this knowledge base, but you've taken it a step further. And like, pro tip, my favorite interview question is, of the core values, which one do you find that you use the most? Asking the interviewer, because they should be familiar with their core values too. And then also thinking through, not just do I want this job, but actually understanding the company that you're going to work for, the person that you're going to be reporting into, because that'll dictate your success long-term in the company, developmental opportunities, things of that nature. So you want to ask questions like, of the people that over your career, the people that have reported into you, what is your favorite success story? Asking the interviewer that, because now you can dig a little bit deeper into how they're developing the members on their team, because they should have solid examples about, oh, I had an employee and they were able to take on another management position in another department they were passionate about, or something of that nature. They should be able to give you those answers. So it's not really just about getting a job, but making sure you align your skills and your experience and your background with the corporation. So coming into the interview with good interview questions prepared ahead of time is number one. And number two, being able to, I lost my train of thought that quick, but being able to really showcase and tell your story. So when you think of, I'm assuming you guys have talked about or are familiar with the behavior interview questions, situation, action, and result. So when you're thinking about going into an interview, ask yourself some interview questions, jot them down, look up for a role that you're interviewing for, Google top interview questions for this role, and sit down and write down good answers so that you're not really caught off guard, but you got a handful of stories to pull from your previous experience. Tell me about a time that you had to X, or had to work with a difficult customer. We've done that no matter if you're entry level or senior level, we've worked with difficult folks. So how do you answer that question? Being able to talk about the situation, the actions that you took, and what the results were. So candidates that come in and they blow that out of the water are always going to stand out, because what you want the interviewer to walk away with is being able to imagine you doing their job. So if I know that, you know what, we work in this industry and I have a lot of difficult customers, and you come in with a good example, I can imagine you doing this job. And that's what you want the interviewer to walk away with. And that's what's going to make you stand out amongst the crowd during an interview.
Thank you for that. You mentioned in part of your response the importance of knowing the core values and being able to demonstrate or speak to how the core values relate to you. We talked earlier about the importance of being conservative in your approach. And so can you give some perspective on how you communicate how the core value is really who you are without getting too personal? Or what is the line? What should be a barrier on how personal you get?
So whenever you're thinking about interviewing, you want to kind of reserve this space to your professional experience. Even if it was a part-time job working in any industry, reserve the way you're answering questions to that. So then they can understand that from a business perspective. And as a recruiter, I've heard a little bit of everything when it comes to interview answers. But the candidates that are always going to stand out is being able to align when you talk about something personal, right? It's personal in a business environment. Like, this is what I experienced while I was working with this company, and this is why this matters to me. And so like my current company, one of our the core values is to be able to move fast. And so in an interview, they asked us questions. Tell me about a time you had to make a decision without all the information. And so that is a question for somebody to ask you, right? And so as a hiring leader, I've always had to make decisions without all the information because our goal is always to move fast. We have to close out roles. We have to get people into are hired into the company, especially when we're on tight deadlines. And so being able to think through those questions ahead of time and not talk about your personal life, not what happened at home, not what happened with your friends, but actually when I was working for this organization, I had an opportunity to do this. This is what came up, and this was the results of my actions that I took. And allow it to be confined in your work experience or volunteer work or your internship during those times.
Thank you. Yo, Terry. I can't believe that someone would say that to you. I'm curious on, I'm guessing that as a person on campus, you do have a familiar relationship or more familiar relationship with students. So I'd love to hear a unique or uniquely compelling situation that you've encountered that really demonstrated, or frankly, went the other way. You choose. And let's get you off mute. Okay.
No, that's great. First of all, sometimes I wish I could turn off the simplicity button that's in my head. Is that to the students that are on here that are seeking jobs or looking to get information from this session, please understand that everybody on this call was in your shoes at one time in their career, and that Danielle Robinson didn't go from undergrad to executive level at Diageo. And please understand that. And when she says truth and being honest with it, she's asking for that. We've seen enough BS that we can see it as you start talking about it. And that's the thing with being home for those 2 years. You can't run that kind of stuff right off the bat. So you have to be able to talk to people and give them some true examples of what you're doing. Danielle hit it right on the head. The other thing is students or those that are on the call, for her to go back and say something about Black MBA Association, of all the conferences that she's ever been to, and she can remember something specific about somebody that she met through that organization, shows that the impact you can have on somebody by just being yourself. And that's the kind of impression you want to leave on someone by just being who you are. It doesn't matter where it could be on the elevator, it could be at a restaurant. Well, not as much as a restaurant because people are there to eat, but it could be in that professional setting where you're able to talk to someone. And Black MBA is a clear example of where you have a chance to have 5 to 10 minutes in front of some key folks that will change your life forever. It would change your life forever. So if I fast forward now to here at Delaware State, 2 quick examples was one, I had one of the varsity basketball players, men's basketball team. I've had both men and women in my office, basketball players. And when you look at their resumes, they don't have a lot of work experience because they're playing at a high level in a D1 capacity. And the competition is such where if you want to be the best, your focus is school, keeping your body in shape, and playing basketball. And that's the bottom line. So when you put your resume together and you talk about captain men's varsity basketball team, and then you've run some camps and done some things. And then the question was, tell me, what's a skill to you? Tell me what your skills are. And they go, and I said, okay, well, let's go back. Let's back into it. What are your strengths? Well, I think I'm a decent communicator. I think that I'm able to follow directions. And then we just start going on and on and on. I said, tell me a weakness. Well, my weakness is sometimes I just don't step up from a leadership standpoint. And it takes a lot for me to be able to get my point across without thinking that I'm offending someone. I say, let's stay on the basketball court. As a captain, You have got to know everything that's going on the court. You've got to know what time practice is, what you're supposed to be wearing, what time when you're traveling, what time you're supposed to leave. That time management piece, you have to get to your study halls on time. You have to hold everybody else accountable, because if they don't get the grades, they're not on the team. And when you're on the court, if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, how do you communicate that to the person that's on the court? Here's the play. This is where you're supposed to be at. I'm going to dribble this way, and then I'm going to look for you to take the back cut, and I'm going to lob you the basketball. Got it. It's the same way in a corporate office. You have got to be able to see the whole picture. You've got to be able to talk to someone and know what your role is, what their role is, and how you collaborate to get that together. And those are the kind of things you talk about in your interview as an athlete. Companies want you to be able to come in, know what your role is, be able to do some things individually, but they want you to come in and have a team aspect and a team mindset to make that work. It doesn't matter what industry you're in or what you're trying to do. The second example I want to use, and I tell these students this all the time, you all are the brightest, most technologically savvy generation ever, hands down. Their biggest giggle for me is when they put their skills being Word. And then I said, wait a minute, let me tell you about Word. When I was growing up, we used to all work so hard to go to this Microsoft Office class and get this certificate to say, I am a Microsoft suite. I know how to do Word. And then I pick up the phone and I say, Word is on your phone. The second graders can do Word, so is that a skill set? Boom, they get it. I had the folks here from Disney last week. And during my conversation with Disney, I was telling them, and this may be something that you all don't know about Delaware State University, we have a child care facility on campus that is run by our senior students and our graduate students, where they have a full program for preschool. We also have an early college high school on campus that goes from 9th grade to 12th grade, where students can get up to 60 credit hours when they graduate from high school before they go to their first day of college. When you're in front of the companies, you don't talk about that. You take that stuff for granted. Mr. Bankston, that's what I'm supposed to do. I got 60 credit hours and I did this. I went to early college high school. And what happened that day was, when I had the Disney folks here, the preschoolers were practicing for a performance that they were going to have. And they were going to take over the auditorium where we were doing my presentation. And so I said, well, we got to go. So we went out in the foyer of the entertainment and humanities building, and the preschoolers were walking in line to go past us to go into the auditorium. And the Disney folks are standing there watching what's happening. The interaction was the college students were high-fiving the kids were waving at them, and they were having this great interaction with them, saying, oh yeah, I go in there and talk to some of these students. I do this with the Disney folks and I just stood back because I could not have planned for that to happen, where a Danielle or a Leslie are watching my students do exactly what I said that we do on a daily basis, and I didn't. It happened by accident. Those are the kind of things that you cannot take for granted. Community service, things that you do in your sororities and fraternities, all the clubs and things you belong to, and that you're officer with those clubs. Put that stuff on your resume and talk about it, because the simple example for me is Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. I tell my students, especially the young lady who's on the women's basketball team, if you grew up working in the Girl Scouts and there was a big part, and now you're doing volunteer work, that's what they want to hear. If Diageo has Girl Scouts as or let's go with Feed America as a entity that they do and they adopt as a company, why wouldn't they want to know that you volunteer time at Feed America so that if they have something that they want to do, okay, Tyshawn would be a perfect person that she can step right into the role to make that happen. Well, Mr. Banks, I do it because no, talk about it. It's not bragging on yourself. The person sitting out in the lobby is going to tell their story. Why don't you tell yours? And that's when then we come back into that soft skill stuff. When they didn't have anybody to talk to at home about this stuff, they could be first generation. We get a lot of first generations, and they just take that stuff for granted. So my thing is always going to be, when I see the light bulb screwed in tighter, because the basketball player that was here that day, and I have to go here with this one, he was like, "Oh shit, Mr. Banks." I said, "What'd you say?" He said, I'm sorry. I never thought about that like that. And you're right. I have to step up and when I'm talking to the other players. And I feel more comfortable when I'm doing that. That's a strength. Make it in some, and tell the recruiters that that's what you're looking for.
So thank you very much for that those specific examples. I think it's interesting how you and Leslie talked about, I think, the importance of being authentic in your core values and using who you really are, not trying to come up with an example that's not necessarily heartfelt or genuine, which actually, for me, raises the topic of cultural bias. How do you balance who you are and being conservative in your display? How do you think about that? Do you ever get pushback, like, am I code switching? Is this authentically who I am? And I'm just going to throw it out there for anybody. Just how do you think about bringing your authentic self with, and not feeling disingenuous or authentic on who you are because you're code switching?
So I came off mute, so I'll jump in. So I decided, and I'm military, and so I was very conservative in the way, in my approach at all times. Hyper professional is probably how I would describe myself when I went into corporate and started interviewing for roles. I decided a while back that I was going to come in as my authentic self. Like I was gonna, wear a blouse. I wasn't gonna be in a heavy suit, which is all, if you're comfortable in that space, it's okay. But I decided I didn't want to show up that way. And I would show up as my normal self. My favorite interview question is actually, after I ask all the professional questions, my favorite interview question is, if you could have any theme song play when you leave the house, what song would it be? That's my favorite interview question. And it always gets people laughing, and I laugh, and then they ask me back. But the biggest thing I figured out in that along that journey is that people want to work with people they like. After you get done with all the technical stuff and answering all the interview questions, your ability to do the job is one thing, but your ability to showcase who you are as an individual. So effective communication matters. Talking about things you're passionate about. If you're volunteering for a not-for-profit organization or you play sports, those things are the things that make you you. And you can't take for granted that everyone does it, because it's a lot of people who haven't done the amazing things you've done. So going into an interview and being open and transparent about some of those things will absolutely set you apart, because now maybe the interviewer played basketball overseas for 15 years before they started their job. Now you got something in common. So if you come on to the company and you begin to work side by side, now you guys have something that you can talk about and collaborate on. So it could be a great opportunity to showcase who you are. And the reality is, I think we all probably like to work in places where we can show up as our authentic selves and it's valued. And people know what you're passionate about, and they can help you align your projects and the roles that you have with the things that you enjoy doing. And so the more transparent you are, the better. But definitely from a professional lens, because there's too far over. You don't want to come in talking about all the extra stuff, but being open to talk. I played basketball in high school. Being able to say things like that and have that discussion, I think, is invaluable, especially in a job interview, getting the job, and then when you start the corporation. So I don't do code switching. I just show up just like I'm here now, because this is how I am in all environments. So I show up as myself.
Thank you.
So just to add on to what Leslie said, I actually do think it is code switching in a sense because, I don't talk in an interview or even in corporate America the way I talk with my girlfriends on a Saturday afternoon over some cocktails, although we drink cocktails a lot here. I do think that, for me, like I said, if you speak well and use proper English and how you speak, a lot of those things are the things that will X you out in the beginning. If they pick up slang, like I said, if that's how you talk on Saturday, Friday night, great. But in an interview, that's the one thing that's like a red flag right away, because especially if you're externally facing and you're with clients, they don't want to have that distinction that they're hearing in your speech. So to me, I just talk like that all the time so that it's not necessarily code switching. But when I think of code switching, I think it is more about how in your approach. So even in your way that you're dressing, I always say conservative is the place you should lean as far as dress code, even if the environment of the company is business casual or whatever you think they are. You don't do that on an interview. That's not the place to do it because you are interviewing. They are not interviewing, so they can be in khakis and a button down. That's not how you should come in unless you're interviewing in a warehouse, because that might be a different situation where they have a dress code. I think that's all important, that you understand what kind of environment it is that you're going to be working in. And those are some of the questions that you should ask. Hairstyle. I know Leslie's in the hair care business, but hairstyle was always and is still in some capacities and careers still an issue. So you can't go to every interview with your natural curls like this necessarily. And sometimes when I interview, I automatically just put it in a bun just because that's not an issue about my hair or how ethnic I am or anything like that. It's just, you want to just not have any of those things on the table, that they're focused on you and listening to what you are saying about your capability and your career, not the hoochie mama dress that you had on because you thought it was real cute and it might have been cute at the party on Saturday night, but it's not necessarily proper for the interview. So, dress over the knees, you're trying to not make that a determining factor.
Okay, so thank you. I think we've talked a lot about communication. I'm hearing some themes, conservative communication, authenticity. I'm wondering, of all the power skills that if there are any key ones, I'd like to just do one last round that you think are important to focus on before we give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Above and beyond the conservative communication, especially across different platforms.
To Ms. Robertson's original question, this is my favorite song, Mary, Mary, I Just Can't Give Up Now. So that's my song.
That's your come out song? Okay.
That's my come out song is Mary, Mary, I Just Can't Give Up Now. I think that when we talk about, and this goes back to just your last question, is that, and again, I'll say now that Ms. Robertson has said some things about her that I didn't know, I know Danielle very well. I can say that we've all had a ton of experiences in the past. We've been places, we've done things, we've been with some folks that if they knew who we've been with, it may shock some people that we've been around those folks. Coming here to this HBCU and being the director of career services, where I've been, what I've done, who I've done things with, I've eaten breakfast in the House of Commons in London, doesn't mean a damn thing if I can't engage with the students. It doesn't matter where I've been or what I've done or how, because they're not listening to me because I haven't been able to engage with them. And one of the things that I've learned from growing up in a management skills piece is that I always used to have managers that, and I can use Danielle as a perfect example. If Danielle and I were talking and Fields was a student, there's some managers that wouldn't introduce Danielle to Fields because Danielle is my client and my friend, and Fields doesn't need to know who she is. No, I changed that here. If Danielle and I are having a conversation sitting down at the table and one of my students walks over and speaks to me, or says something or waves at me, I'm gonna pull them over. Let me introduce you to Ms. Robinson and introduce yourself. It's no better way for me to get them to understand that we all put our pants on the same way, and they can talk to you about some things and just say hello, because that's what they're going to remember, how you felt about who you were. I had one of my top students I introduced to the Disney folks the other day, and I said, tell Cortland a little bit about yourself. Well, my name is CC, but that's not my real name. My name is this, and I'm from Philly. I said, you're from where? I'm from Philadelphia. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and my major is sports management, and this is what I want to do with my degree. Boom. So when they see me on campus, they're not afraid to come up to me and want to know who I'm talking to, because I am going to introduce them, because I never know what's going to make a difference in their lives. They will not see a Danielle Robinson in their neighborhood for the most part. They may, but it's not somebody that they'd be able to meet all the time. So at least you got a chance to meet someone, Google them, find out who they are. And you know now, wow, I met Danielle Robinson at Delaware State. If you happen to see her somewhere else, Mr. Bankston introduced me to you when you were at Delaware State University. I just want to come over and say hello. You talk about a confidence builder in some of these students who don't have that opportunity. Only because I went through it, I will never put somebody else through that same situation. So the soft skill of being able to have confidence in yourself, stand up, give a quick, brief information about who you are, and keep it moving. Boom. If Ms. Robinson wants to continue the conversation, stay there and talk to her. If I give you, let me finish up my discussion, I'll grab you in a little bit. Boom. Don't be offended. Boom, I'm there to do that. And when I say we put our pants on the same way, we actually do. And that's what has gotten me over, especially with Black MBA, because we had so many prima donnas that used to come through our organization to speak or to be a part of some things. And we just break it down to simple facts. And it works. And that's who we are to make this thing happen. And the students and the folks that have been around us have done nothing but gone on to bigger and better things. Absolutely.
Okay, relationships matter. Dr. Robinson, are there any of the power skills that we did not highlight in this conversation that you want to make sure that before we move on, before we wrap up, actually, that you want to make sure?
I would say the one thing we didn't really talk about is making sure that you are on LinkedIn. If you are looking for a job in today's world and you're looking for corporate folks, LinkedIn is the place to go. Even if the corporation is not necessarily your end all be all, it could be nonprofits. Most people in business are on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to somebody at a company that you want to work at and personally send them a note and say, I really want to work there. How do you suggest that I go about it? Do you have 15 minutes that you can jump on a quick Zoom with me and just tell me a little bit about the company? People will do that for you. I've met the most fascinating people through a LinkedIn post or a LinkedIn personal message. Links people together. You can connect people there, but that's where a lot of jobs are and a lot of postings for jobs are. So you can apply directly through LinkedIn. So I think that's the one thing that I would drop on today, or on the Race for Diversity site, the College Diversity Network site. Either of those sites, have a ton of jobs and links, and you can apply directly to companies through those sites.
Hey, Leslie, I'm going to toss it to you and ask if there's a soft power skill that we haven't highlighted in this conversation that you want to make sure our students pay attention to.
I really like the LinkedIn post. If you haven't shared your LinkedIn, make sure you take a moment to do so you can increase your connections. I'm really huge on LinkedIn. As a recruiter, I use LinkedIn all the time. To add on to reaching out, I would suggest two things: reaching out to people under the vertical that you're interested in learning more about. So if you're PR, you're going to school for PR, reach out to individuals that are actively working and engaging in PR and ask them for a coffee chat. This is the one thing throughout my career that has carried me really far is asking for the coffee chat. I've gotten on calls with vice presidents at Meta because I asked for a coffee chat. And people love talking about themselves. So if you position it like, I would love to learn more about you. I heard you did some amazing things. Would you be open to a coffee chat? Most of them will say yes. And so if you reach out for the coffee chat and ask questions, well thought out questions, scour their LinkedIn, know how they transition throughout their career, ask them questions about that, and kind of get into it, they'll become a part of your network long term. So when there's an opportunity that maybe they have a role that they're interviewing for later on down the road, once you're done with school, you can reach out to that person and have a plug in. And so doing things like that is always for the win. And then also building connections with the kinds of companies that you're interested in working for with like HR folks. So people that are in recruiting, people that are in various verticals of HR, because if you're connected to them already, when a role comes open, you can reach out directly. And so those are some of like my favorite tips on how to actually use LinkedIn, not just have a profile to be there, but actually use it to send people messages and engage and share things, because we actually, like as a recruiter, I go to LinkedIn and I look and see what kind of things you shared, who's tagged you in posts, things of that nature, because I'm interested. You should, whatever you're doing, even as an entry-level person, a college student, you should be an expert at your level. Like share whatever you can about your field of interest at your level, or knowledge about HBCUs or whatever it is that you're doing. You always want to put your best foot forward and become what we call a SME. A subject matter expert, even at whatever level you're at, because people will look at that and people will see that you're active and you're communicating effectively, kind of deal. And so that's another way to kind of showcase. Like I always know when somebody's in the market for a new job, because I can go right on LinkedIn and see them posting literally I can almost time it because of my recruiting background. So those are the kinds of things you want to do as a young professional that's entering your career. And I have to say this because Terry mentioned it earlier about not bragging on yourself. Our counterparts, when you see their resumes and when they come in interviews and talk about themselves, they talk about everything they've ever done in their career and every organization they've participated in. And the way that they're describing their background is just vastly different than I've seen in our community. It's not bragging, it's making sure that the interviewer understands how you will be an asset to that corporation and how your previous work experience, your organizations, playing sports, whatever it is that you've done, how you will be able to align that with the role of choice to be able to be successful in that role. And that's what you want to come in and talking about, because our counterparts do it. And not only do it, they ask for $20,000 over the top of the salary bands. So that's how you position yourself, by being able to tell the story, because it'll dictate how much money you're going to make in terms of salary and what the company's offering. All of those things are dictated off of the information that how you're putting yourself out there. Okay, that's
great. So I know we are short on time, so I want to really quickly recap. What we heard is be conservative in your delivery, be prepared to ask specific questions, preferably something that's not on the website, be able to go above and beyond that. Google questions to find out what questions are being asked in those interviews. Be strong on LinkedIn and ask for coffee chats. I mean, there was a lot of other stuff in there, but I do want to say that this session has been recorded. Please visit us on the web, bestprogram.org. Don't forget to go to career diversity. Well, let me just let Fields Jackson, can you jump in to send us out and one more time tell us about the fair?
And Leslie, being a recruiter, I'm so glad to hear your feedback, because again, the College Diversity Network, we're going to have a virtual career fair 2 days from now. 15 recruiters, just like Leslie, will be there. So to Terry and Danielle's point, do your homework. Do your homework, research the company, and nothing's more powerful to go into the company. If you see a job, apply. You get a confirmation. So when a recruiter says, what brings you here today? I already applied. It changes. So again, I applied for this job in Atlanta. It changes the conversation. and here's my confirmation number, pull it up and let's talk about my resume. So Leslie, to hear, I've been saying this in classrooms, and Danielle knows I've been riding around with Terry, and so I've been going around. So I've been telling folks that, but to hear a recruiter say that, thank you very much. Because again, if you come in prepared, you can change that interview. Do your homework. And there's 15 companies that are there. Danielle Robinson and others will be there. So the people that have the power to hire you will be at our career fair. It's free. Register, and again, hopefully we'll hear some great news about people getting jobs by the end of the week. So thank you, Carolyn, for that plug.
So thank you everyone for today. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Dr. Danielle. Thank you, Terry. I guess one last question. Anyone want to jump in with what the theme song should be for walking out of this meeting? I love that. Anyone got a song they want to tell us?
Champagne Life.
There you go.
Neo.
Okay, visit us on the web. Thank you again, and have a great interview season. Bye-bye.
Thank you.